The Supreme Court has dismissed the appeal by former Vice President and presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, seeking to nullify the February 25th presidential election of President Bola Tinubu. In a unanimous judgment, the top court dismissed Atiku's appeal for lacking merit and affirmed the judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Court, which upheld the election of Tinubu. In the notice of appeal, Atiku had urged the apex court to dismiss and set aside the September 6th judgment of the Presidential Election Petition Court, which affirmed the electoral victory of President Tinubu. A 7-man panel of justices led by Inyang Okoro, in considering the first issue for determination, held that failure to transmit election results electronically did not affect the outcome of the election and could not warrant cancellation of the presidential election. The apex court also stated that Atiku did not produce alternative results of the presidential election that showed that he won majority of lawful votes cast to dismiss the ones declared by the electoral body INEC. The court resolved all the 7 issues distilled for determination in favor of Tinubu.
And in reaction to the Supreme Court judgment, the presidential villa is abuzz with activity as political associates, appointees, and well-wishers of President Bola Tinubu convert at the seat of power to extend their congratulations. This follows his victory earlier today at the apex court. Among the early visitors are Governor Dakwa Abiodun of Ogun State, Governor Doyediri of Bayelsa State, Governor Abdullahi Sule of Nasarawa State.
Mr. President,
and the Independent National Electoral Commission and others, I completely disagree. Therefore, I agree with my learned brother that the motion of the appellants filed on the 6th of October 2020
started from day one to work hard, regardless of, the court cases, okay? And just strengthen my resolve to do more. A challenge of this nature and a victory of this nature is more work, and more hard work, more dedication. Just appeal to the sense of patriotism of Nigeria to have a change of mindset. Let us be positive about our country, be ready to contribute in all ways possible. There's no promise of El Dorado from day one. We're all in this boat of diversity, a member of the same family, living in the same house, but staying in different rooms. And it is important that we recognize that we have no other country but this one. So we better be committed to it, not for the sake of our own self-aggrandizement. Our commitment to the values, the creed of dedication, patriotism, and commitment to the value of this country. It is extremely important that we have a change of mindset for the sake of our country. Not for us, but for our children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the inheritors of tomorrow.
And we are now joined by Arise News analyst and lawyer Frank Tietie to discuss the judgment, landmark judgment at the Supreme Court today. Frank, thank you for joining us on Newsday. So what do you make of the judgments? Did any of it come as a surprise to you?
Not quite. It didn't come as a surprise because first, we have seen a Court of Appeal judgment that was very detailed. It was as if the Court of Appeal judges were set to defend the decision they were taking, and they were so meticulous. They put extra effort in, putting across that judgment. So, having seen that Court of Appeal judgment before the appeal to the Supreme Court, I knew that it was going to be very difficult to overturn. Nevertheless, we saw novel issues coming with the attempt by Atiku Abubakar to get fresh evidence that was going to be very fundamental in the outcome of the case. But it was also going to rest on whether the Supreme Court would make a pronouncement on it. The Supreme Court, well, having said that it didn't have to go into inquiring into that judgment, also considered the fact that not going into the inquiring into that evidence, also considered that if it were to inquire into it, it would also not have mattered. So that laid it to rest. What strikes me more about the judgment is the speed with which it came and the smooth reactions that it has received. The Nigerians seem to care less about the outcome. Nevertheless, the expectation was that having raised such issues, because forgery is a constitutional matter when it comes to election, and the Supreme Court being a court of justice that had the inherent powers to actually look at any issue. If the Supreme Court wanted to actually consider it, could have invoked its powers under Section 6 of the Constitution. But to limit itself within the jurisdictional limit of Section 285 of the Constitution is saying that all of those pieces of evidence could have been brought within 180 days at the tribunal. Showed that the Supreme Court was not willing to shake the tables and the shares within the political space. But again, it's good that there's an end to the litigation, the election litigation. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and his team will no longer have the excuse of saying they are keeping some things in waiting, even though I saw a President Tinubu that expressed a lot of faith in the gale of appointment he was making, despite the pendency of the matter at the Supreme Court. Wasn't too impressed when President Tinubu's reaction is to his team and his staffers that their jobs are secure. That's not the impression that should come after the judgment. Of course, the statement looked quite presidential and quite inspiring. But to think the impression that it gives to Nigerians when you say your jobs are secure is that government is a matter of profit. It's a matter of patronage. That is, people who work in government, who are political appointees, are there first for their own interest. And that's so the expectation is that if their jobs are secure, they will be whining and dining tonight, drinking champagne, that they are victorious. Whereas there is a lot of problems facing Nigerians at this time. If I would have expected a more somber mode in the presidency, because we had a very seriously and keenly contested election, and not only that, something that was close to a near bitter fight in the pursuit of evidence to prove that he forged the documents that he presented to the Independent National Electoral Commission. Even though these are supposed to be insignificant issues, but considering the enormity of the problems and the weight of governance that he has, one should expect that the president and his team should have just taken this judgment as something which the president also alluded to as a call to serious national duty and not a time for unnecessary celebration.
Well, very well said, Mr. Tietie. But I'm wondering what impact this ruling will have on voter confidence when it seems INEC right now cannot be trusted to keep its rules, considering the fact that the Supreme Court said the failure to transmit election results electronically, as INEC promised, did not affect the outcome of the election.
Oh, well, let me be honest with you. As commentators on the news and trends, we've been accused of sparing INEC too much, of not actually laying the blame where it ought to be, and that the issues we're focusing on the issues that either Atiku Abubakar or Peter Obi are bringing on the table. INEC actually holds a lot of blame in this whole thing. INEC has let Nigerians down several times. INEC, having had all the resources that it has always requested for to conduct elections will constantly leave Nigerians in doubt. I will not be able to, to raise the integrity bar of our elections. It's a big shame that INEC will allow this country to waste so much resources in terms of, in the judicial process and all other combined issues. Waste resources in such very needless and reckless manner just to defend an election that it could not conduct in a manner that will engender confidence. INEC has actually been a failure. The Supreme Court didn't really excuse INEC. It said, look, if INEC had said that the IREF was a factor, that it was going to upload the results on the IREF portal for Nigerians to follow, for Nigerians to track what was going on, and it failed to do so, no doubt, the Supreme Court said that no doubt that would affect the confidence of the Nigerians in the electoral process. But however, it couldn't have agreed because it was a statutory matter. The matter in terms of collation. Collation is statutory and not a matter of policy or a rule made by INEC. And that if the failure did not and could not have been the basis for obtaining the election. Yes, so INEC holds a lot of blame. And in that case, there should be a lot of scrutiny on the next generation of leaders of the Independent National Electoral Commission. I think we've indeed spared INEC unnecessarily. I think when you raise the issue of voter confidence, INEC didn't even do so much in attempting to cure voter apathy in this election. Look at the figures, that less than 25% of Nigerians voting to elect a president. It shows that Nigerians are already not interested in the electoral process. Now, but a lot will depend on the outcome of the 4-year rule of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, whether he can engender that interest in Nigerians to make determinations. In fact, if we have seen a more robust political space where the election at local government levels, state and ultimately federal levels are more responsive to the needs of the people. I mean, I'm talking about governance. If governance has been more responsive to the need of the people, then we will see a greater number of participants in the coming elections. But we see government, and that is the problem, as a place where people go and get easy money, get easy appointment, get easy access to the national cake. And so the people believe that it is not about them. But when they realize, we see the number of policies that are being rolled out in the FCT that are now impacting people, and then people are now beginning to ask questions. If the other party were in power, would we have this kind of policies? When such questions are coming up, I believe that it will be natural for Nigerians to now take interest in the electoral process. But if it is INEC has been a disservice, undoubtedly a big disservice and a big, letdown to Nigerians when it comes to increasing voter confidence. No, INEC has been the problem.
And in that same vein, Frank, we know that the off-season elections will be taking place in a couple weekends in Imo, Bayelsa, and Kogi State. Do you anticipate that this ruling will have any effect on the way INEC goes about carrying out their duties that day?
I doubt. I very much doubt. The go-to-court cliche is something that INEC has established, that it will just carry out any election with minimum standards and any disaffected party can just go to court. So I don't think so. INEC has put a seal on INEC's ineptitude and carelessness. That is the way I think the judgment, that's the impact I think the judgment will make and give to INEC. INEC will continue to do its business as usual, conduct the elections to the best of its, not to the best of its ability, but with not even below minimum standards, and then expect that disgruntled elements should go to court and while it minds its business, and then appropriate its resources and its budgetary allocations for litigation and pay so much to lawyers. That shouldn't really be. I have always challenged INEC and its leadership that they have everything it takes to conduct elections, and those who lost will extend a handshake to the winners and say, yes, they believe that they lost, and then they will use the indices of the election to plan for their next campaign season. But INEC has seemed to operate as if it's participant. It has interest in any of these parties. It shouldn't be so. And as if we've seen too much of prebendalism in the way the elections in Nigeria, elections generally in Nigeria have been conducted. INEC has not done anything to reduce that. So it has still been a money affair, the greater influence, and then the abuse and misuse of security forces in the way elections are managed. INEC can do better. But if you ask me, and my answer to that question, whether this will have any impact in the way INEC conducts the election, in the off-season elections, I would say no. It will not have any impact.
So what next constitutionally after this ruling? Should we be talking about further electoral amendments or drafting a new constitution, as some legal minds have suggested?
People are expressing a lot of disappointment in President Tinubu because he doesn't seem to reflect that democratic spirit that has been associated with him before he became president, something that has been associated with him in the days where he struggled as a pro-democracy activist. People are already saying that this is a president that might likely put so much to maintain the status quo, building after where former President Buhari left without much changes. But I challenge those persons who hold those views to the fact that President Tinubu must now hold himself as a progressive president, the person who as governor had wished for state police, who had wished for greater autonomy for local governments, who had wished that state governments have more money, have more control over constitutionally restricted issues, to now produce and provide services to the people that they govern. So we're expecting some sweeping changes in the electoral process. President Tinubu, again, you see, one of the reasons why I have always expected gerontocratic proponents who believe that the age is not a matter when it comes to leading a country like Nigeria, is that, okay, for persons who have advanced in age and are presidents, like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, they should be thinking more of legacies. So a man who is widely traveled, who has crisscrossed the country, made his fortunes and worked in the United States, became governor, and also fought so hard to become president, one would expect that he should challenge himself to leave a country, to build a country and leave it as a country that can compete with other countries of the West, other countries of the world that are prosperous and stable. So everything that is necessary, it should be done. And so definitely there is expected to be widespread reforms, especially in the electoral sector. Again, it is not only about economy or political stability. It is also not about immediate solutions that are pandering to that are populist in nature. It's also about building an enduring country that, even though in the midst of its problems, it can have a direction, it can have a foundation upon which it can progress, not a level of uncertainty. And again, I was a bit excited seeing a president that exercised so much faith in himself. Despite the hanging issues over his head concerning the election petition at the Supreme Court, he was seriously involved quickly and, making many appointments, all the same, making appointments in critical areas of the economy and generally the polity, meaning that he didn't care what the outcome was going to be. He was so confident in himself, meaning that he wants the dividends of his good governance to impact Nigerians. But Nigerians, I must say, are suffering. They can hardly understand why the Naira is on a free fall at the terrible rate that it has against the dollar now. So Nigerians must see a president that is so empathetic, so compassionate, so willing and so spirited in the way he wants to immediately solve their problems, and not the one that wants to ensconce himself in the victory of power.
And Frank, I know earlier you said you weren't surprised by the judgment, but for some Nigerians who aren't very well-versed in law and the processes of the Supreme Court, I'm sure a lot of them might be a little bit surprised, as there were quite a few technicalities and issues that seemed would be a slam dunk or a smoking gun, but actually turned out not to be. With the judiciary, all eyes were on them. In your opinion, How did they perform throughout this whole process?
Let me tell you why I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised because the Court of Appeal had done its job. Had done its job as if it was defending its position in such a very meticulous manner. So if you read the judgment of the Court of Appeal, you will know that it will be difficult for the Supreme Court to overturn that. The Supreme Court will have to go out of its way. We've always, like I've tried to, point out that when lawyers attest or refer to the inherent jurisdiction of the court, the idea is that the court has superordinary powers to do justice beyond the letters of the law. So it can actually go beyond the letters of the Constitution or the Electoral Act to actually do justice. But when a Supreme Court decides that it is going to stay within the ambit of the statutes, with the ambit of the Constitution, on giving a literal construction of the provisions of the Constitution, then you cannot fault it. What the Supreme Court says, for example, that those pieces of evidence, however relevant they would have been, to this decision, so long as those evidence were not canvassed, they were not put forth at the appeal court, at the Presidential Election Tribunal, there was nothing they could do. It also went further to say that even if those pieces of evidence were to be germane, his decision would have been different. So for me, I don't have any problem with the decision of the the Supreme Court, more especially because of the legal tradition that I subscribe to as a lawyer, that I will not attempt to try to, fault the Supreme Court unless we can engage in subsequent treatises to criticize it in the hope that if it ever has the opportunity again to make such a decision, it will change its mind. But with the understanding that whatever pronouncement the Supreme Court makes amounts to law, I think I will leave it at that and not contend further.
Well, Frank, you might not have any issues, with the ruling, but there's been a lot of reaction on social media, and quite a number of Nigerians do have issues with the ruling. I've seen reactions like justice died at the Supreme Court today. Some people believe the Supreme Court relied more on technicalities rather than substance of the evidence and so on. Clearly, we have some Nigerians who do not have faith in our judicial system, believing that they are corrupt, possibly, and biased. Now, how do we change this perception and strengthen the judiciary in Nigeria?
You're asking a very big question, and it's a very difficult question. Yes, I agree with you that the indices out there in the social media and also the perception in the mindset of many Nigerians is that the judiciary is corrupt. And again, I've also seen corruption perception indices that have been published by the National Bureau of Statistics with the help of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. I can tell you too that such empirical pieces of evidence also attest to the fact that the perception of the judiciary in Nigeria is corrupt. I also, as a practicing lawyer, I've seen a lot of corruption in the judiciary, though it is in the non-judge, I would say, beyond the judges' chambers. I've seen a lot of corruption, especially when it comes in the registry. I must tell you that. So I will be doing myself a disservice. I will be misusing this platform if I prevaricate, if I do not say the truth. And the truth is that the perception, and to a large extent, as a matter of reality, the Nigerian judiciary is corrupt. Now, your question is so difficult. You're asking me to provide solutions to the widespread perception of a judiciary that is said to be corrupt by Nigerians, that is supposed to serve. That is all I can say is that we must acknowledge that it is a problem, and then the judiciary, not only the judiciary, including the president, must now set out to do what we call restoration of judicial confidence. It is a big problem because even lawyers now approach courts with that kind of double-mindedness, no longer trusting that there will be a pronouncement on what is the law anymore. That kind of uncertainty is grave for the legal profession. And I'm talking about lawyers. Then this idea, and again, when you see that the National Judicial Council appears to be giving lightweight, punishment or discipline to judges that have been outrightly, caught collecting bribes. So, and then when litigants who have actually successfully offered bribes before go about telling Nigerians, telling opponents, or bragging about the fact that they own the court, they own the judiciary, they own the judge comes from their place, the judge is their classmate, or the judge is this. Man, I can assure you that it is worse than perception. It is a matter, I lack the words to tell you that the problem of the fact that there is lack of judicial confidence right now, and that pronouncements of judges are tainted beyond law and facts, and that are actually influenced by various mundane and very sheepish influence and factors. It's a big problem. But I again believe that when we go back to those days, we mentioned, fellows, the days of Oputa JSC, Obaseki and the rest of them, we hope to have a judiciary that was fearless. Even though there was a military government, there was the General Abacha or Babangida and the rest, they didn't care. They declared the law the way it was. When we begin to have those kind of rulings and judgments again, perhaps the restoration of confidence in the judiciary will ensue. But right now, the problem is big. I didn't give them that impression. And again, somehow, the judiciary is not helping matters, because we're in a situation where its actions cannot be predicted. Take, for example, one politician will make a boast that, look, we will tell the Supreme Court not to hear that matter, and eventually the Supreme Court, which has set forth to hear a matter, will unnecessarily just postpone the matter, saying it's not hearing it anymore. So there has been unusual, terrible, and unbridled interference, political interference in the work of the judiciary. And if you are asking for solutions, we perhaps will go back to the appointment process. We'll go back to the fact that who appoints a judge? Do judges in Nigeria write examinations? Do they write tests? Do they show whether they know the law before they are appointed as judges? So in Nigeria, to become a judge, just be a lawyer, do nothing, and remain for 10 years, and then you can just ask one, be close to one governor, and then the governor can simply just appoint you as a judge. That kind of appointment process that is political, that is influenced with a lot of interests that are outside, that are extraneous, that have nothing to do with law and justice, what do you expect the outcome to be? So the perception is that the judge, whoever appoints that judge, the judge will go and protect that interest. I didn't quite prepare for this kind of question, but it's unfortunate that you're bringing it up now, and I cannot lie about it.
Well, Frank, this is the kind of spirited commentary we tune in to watch and hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on Newsday, and thank you for all your comments.